Alright, welcome to class tonight. I do hope that you all are doing well. Last night we started talking through expressions, variables, algebra in general. And tonight we're going to go a little bit deeper. Yesterday we kind of hit the surface. We hit exponents, order of operations, distributive property, those important things. We hit all those things. So tonight we're going to go a little bit deeper. Now you all need to be on page 643. Page 643, that's where we can get into these problems. Alright, so the fifth standard for TCAP is variables are used to represent unknown quantities within equations and inequalities. Now, let's go ahead and get started then. So the first thing I want to emphasize this idea. This is what we call, so the whole thing you see on the screen, this entire thing is what we call an expression. Okay? So that is an expression. And we have 18, in this case, we have 18 equals 5y plus 3. Okay? That is an expression. That's what we call the whole thing. Now the expression can be broken down into several different parts. First of all, each of these, so that right there, and that right there, are what we call terms. Okay? So terms are simply ideas or units within an expression. And then we can even break that down even farther. Erase this. Within our expression, so within each term, we can have what's called a factor, right there, or we can have a variable. Now, you guys should know what variables are. Variables are the letters that we throw into an expression to represent an unknown quantity, or usually we have to solve for the variable. That's in most cases what we're going to be doing. So we have factors and we have variables inside each term. So once again, the big idea is expression. Each unit within an expression is called a term, and then within each term you can have a factor or a variable. Variables are the unknown quantities. So that's the basics. Okay, that's where we're starting. Now let's go ahead and jump into solving some equations then. Now once again, this is on page 643, number 22 and number 25. Now let's go and get started then. Different color up here. Alright, so this first one, b plus 4 equals 7.7. Now, if you're in my classes, I've taught you to look for and make sure you get the variable by itself. That's what's going to help you out if you get the variable by itself. So I have to do whatever I can to get the variable by itself. Now, I've also taught you the way you get the variable by itself is by doing the opposite. So, in this case, b plus 4. So if I see plus 4, I'm going to subtract 4 to get b by itself. If it's b times 4, you would divide by 4 to get b by itself. So right here, it's going to look like this. I'm going to write it over here. So I'm going to go b plus 4, and then I'm going to take away 4, because then this right here goes away. Now, we also remember that whatever we do to one side, we must also do to the other side. So it's 7.7 minus 4. So right here, the plus 4 minus 4, well, that goes to 0. So I'm left with b on this side. b equals 7.4 minus 4. So when I subtract, you would get 3.7. So there you go. For my first one, b equals 3 and 7 tenths. That's the first one. Now let's go do another one very quickly. Alright, so here we have s minus 2 tenths equals 8 and 4 tenths. So remember, back to this one, whatever we have to do the opposite of whatever operation we see to get get the variable by itself. So in this case we're going to add, so it's going to look like this. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and subtract. So I subtract here, so now let's go do the opposite. So that would be 8.4 equals s minus 2 tenths plus 2 tenths. So remember this right here, minus 2 tenths plus 2 tenths is going to cancel each other out. We're going to add 2 tenths here. So I'm left with s on this side. And then I have 2 tenths plus 8 and 4 tenths. So the answer is going to be 8 and 6 tenths equals s. So poor s right there. Let me fix that. There we go. All right, so 8 and 6/10 equals S. So that very simply is equations with addition or subtraction in. The key is get the variable by itself, and then do the opposite. To do that, you do the opposite. Now let's practice some questions with multiplication and division. Okay, so our first one, this one's seen on page 643. First one we see 15 times t equals 600. So my goal is get the t by itself. The way I do that is I'm going to do the opposite. In this case, 15 times t, the opposite is going to be divide by 15. So to get t by itself, I'm going to divide by 15, divide both sides by 15. So t equals, well, 600 divided by 15, so let's set that up and solve. So 15 goes into 64 times. That's 60. So my answer is t equals 40. That was pretty simple right there. All I have to do is the opposite. Now, this next one, a divided by 5/100 equals 140. So now I'm going to do, once again, do the opposite. So a divided by, it's going to look like, let's do it look like this. A divided by equals 140. Let's go ahead and solve this right here. Alright, so now once again, to get this over here, I simply am going to do the opposite. So it's going to look like this. I'm going to here A multiplied by 0 and 5/100 equals 140 multiplied by 5/100. So to find A, I'm simply going to multiply 140 by 5/100. So 140. Let's go like 0, 5, 6, 7, and then everything else is going to be zeros. So I have 700, 2 decimal places. So right there. And so my answer, A equals 7 then. Okay? So that is multiplying, that is equations with multiplying and dividing. Alright, our very last part of this standard has to do with something that won't be found in your book, unfortunately. This is something that I don't, I feel like it needs to be in the book because it is on TCAP. We're going to be talking about what's called independent and dependent variables. Once again, independent and dependent variables. Now, an independent variable is a variable that does not depend, so we get independent, does not depend on another variable. Now, a dependent variable depends or relies on another variable. For example, you see on the board here, you see 6x, so y equals 6x. Now, the interesting thing is, y depends on x, because if you can figure out what x is, you then figure out what y is, and so on and so forth. So this is what we would call right here the independent variable, because it is itself, it can be by itself, 6x is okay, but y depends on x to be able to solve it. Okay, we can't solve for y until we know x. So, now the nice thing is, the standard basically says that you just have to be able to identify a dependent and independent variable. Now, dependent and independent variables are actually pretty easy to solve, pretty easy to find. This first one, I put a couple examples up on the board here. Now, this first one, z equals 3 plus c. Now, in this case, z depends on what c equals. So c would be the independent variable, and z would be the dependent variable, because I have to know what c is before I can find what what c is before I can find what z is. Let's go to this next one over here. T equals 12d plus 4. Now, once again, I cannot find t until I know d. So d is going to be the independent variable, and t is going to be the dependent variable. All right, last two. Now this one's pretty easy because I just kind of set it up. U equals B minus 17. I can't figure out U until I figure out B. And then finally, I kind of switched them around a little bit. 4m equals n. Well, in this case, for m, I need to know first before I can solve for n, because it equals n. So in this case, m would be the independent variable, and n would be the dependent variable. So it's going to look like that. So I know this is brand new information. I know you haven't covered this yet, but it will be on TCAP, so you do need to make sure you understand this information. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that is the lesson tonight. Make sure you bring your notes to class, make sure they're filled out, and especially make sure you have this idea of dependent and independent variables down. This is a big deal. Alright, tomorrow we're going to work some more problems in class. So have a great night, and we'll see you all tomorrow.